Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Industry Insiders webinar, The How and Why of Building Resilience for Leading in the 21st Century. My name is Risha Tyagi. I'm a graduate assistant at the BU Alumni Relations Office, and I'm also finishing up a Master of Science degree in Public Relations from BU College of Communication. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 321,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to you later today. Today we have alumni joining us from places like Karachi, Alaska, Rome, New York, Laguna Beach, West Hollywood, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Somerville, Boston, Watertown, Revere, Brookline, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, please contact Adobe Connect at 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, found at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions you have, and you are welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box you see located below the slides. We hope to get as many questions as we can during today's webinar. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from North Shore of Boston is School of Education alumna Melisa Gillis. Melisa Gillis is an engaging and insightful coach and consultant with over 30 years of successful work in the fields of culture change, strategic planning, and organization development, with a focus on developing leaders, their teams, and organizations. As an active partner working with leaders, she develops customized experiences designed to act as a catalyst for growth and change. Her approach has been described as human and client-centric, collaborating with her clients to ensure content and methodology that satisfies building relationships while soliciting the knowledge and wisdom of the people involved to create growth and sustainable solutions. Melisa has successfully partnered with key stakeholders as both an internal and external coach and consultant, resulting in significant positive results across many industries, including manufacturing, finance, academia, healthcare, and scientific research and development. She currently lives on the North Shore of Boston, Massachusetts, and enjoys sailing, learning, and spending time outdoors. We are very lucky to have Melisa with us today. Melisa, thanks again for being with us, and as soon as I pull up your slides, the floor is yours. All right, Melisa, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you both, Jeff and Risha, for this opportunity to put together this presentation and to share this with folks. It's really a passion of mine. And over the years of working with both individuals and teams and their organizations, there's been a lot of change and a lot of adversity faced by folks. And there's fortunately a lot of research being done around resilience in the last 20 to 30 years and more recently as the rate of change continues to pick up. So I'm really excited to share my thoughts with you folks and to answer any questions at the end. Before we get started, it would be great if I could get a sense of who's out there listening, and I'm curious as to what brought you to here. So what inspired you to join this webinar? So if you could go ahead and just vote real quick. Thank you, Jeff, for putting our poll up there. We'll have a few polls throughout this webinar just to kind of get a sense of who's out there and what you're thinking. It's challenging to have a discussion with a lot of folks on this kind of a webinar, but this is as close as we can get to interactive. So thank you folks for responding. It's really helpful. Obviously the slide deck is done and the presentation is done, but based on what we've got as an audience, it'd be helpful to know kind of who's out there. Great, so it looks like we've got a number of seasoned leaders out there. Great, so we've got a lot of good experience out there. We've got some young professionals and a lot of folks immersed in with stress and ever-changing environments. Great, well, thank you very much for responding for those who did. So we can get on with the webinar here. And so this is a big topic and there's a lot of research out there. So I'm going to be presenting just a slice from my experience and the touch points that I've had with a variety of organizations. So just want to know that we're not boiling the whole ocean here. We're getting one slice of it. So the topics that we're going to cover today are looking at what is VUCA, what is a VUCA, the many recipes that there are out there. We'll look at a couple for how do we create and maintain resilience. And then we will sharpen the focus a bit and look at a couple of skills and strategies that we can start using this afternoon to help build resilience. And then we'll look at mindset, mindfulness, and presence for action within that VUCA environment. There'll be some opportunities there for some stories and sharing some strategies as well. And then looking at what are the choices that we have and how do we self-regulate this body, this mind, body, and soul that we have that is the instrument with which, as leaders, we do our work. And then I do have a slide with some resources that I pulled for this presentation. Moving on with that, we'll take a look at, so what is VUCA? It's the new normal for the 21st century. We've got the rate of change is exponential. If we take a look at the global economy, the diversity, all the things that are impacting the life as we know it. You know, we look at, for example, one slice of our world, communication. You know, the way we used to communicate was pretty simple and pretty stable. We had a phone, we had the postal service, you had face-to-face. Today, the list goes on, and I probably couldn't even begin to scratch the surface of all the ways that we communicate with each other, whether it's phone, Skype, FaceTime, Twitter, texting, Facebook, LinkedIn, online project management through Slack or whatever it is. There's just so many different ways, and that's just how we communicate. And there's so many things implementing, and I don't need to tell you folks because you're living it every day, but this is a world that we're living in. And so one framework that we can take a look at around that VUCA is the VUCA framework, and it's a little bit more explained here in detail. We've got the different pieces. You've got uncertainty. There is cause and effect. We've got change is possible. It's not a given. And what is the approach that we need to take in that environment? You'll see learning is a piece there. And you're going to see that learning throughout all of this. The volatility, it's unknown, it's unexpected. Both the source and the duration of what's going to come our way. How do we prepare? We do some preparation. We get in line the things that we think we might need. And then we need to, again, learn from what's happening. Complexity is a interesting piece there. You've got interconnected and unknown patterns. The cause and effect piece just does not work here. And then we've got ambiguity, which has the causal relationships are completely unclear. There's no precedent there, and there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of experimenting we need to do within that. So this is one look at VUCA and looking at sort of what are the approaches that we can take within that. There's another framework that we can look at around complexity and complication, chaotic and simple. It's a little similar to VUCA. If you look at it, the unpredictability part of the world is on the left side with the complex and the chaotic, and the predictable is on the right with the complicated and simple. David Snowden developed this framework as a way to make sense of problems and issues, situations that are going on. Here's the challenge for us in today's world. We have a lot of problem-solving methodologies, decision-making approaches that work really well in the simple and complicated, where order is apparent, and it's really, there's cause and effect that makes sense, and we can understand and we can forecast. We can plan in 5-10 years out for them. The challenge for us today is that we're living much more on the left side. The world is much more complex. We don't necessarily know cause and effect relationships going in, and we are applying some decision-making approaches and problem-solving methodologies that just don't work for the complex and chaotic world. So there's an opportunity for us to both look at that from a big picture strategic perspective, but also what does that mean for us individually? How do we build our resilience so that we as leaders can be more effective in this world? General George Casey had a comment about the VUCA environments, that people become befuddled by turmoil and they don't act. And we see that a lot. We see that in a lot of different environments where people become almost paralyzed because they're not acting. And we need to create what I call a reservoir of resilience within us, so that when the unknown comes at us and the volatile comes at us, we can find our center. We can find that place where we can stand solid on our 2 feet and have clarity around our purpose, so that even though the world may be a whirlwind around us, we have a place to work from. What they found in research around as soldiers come back from war is that there's 3 different ways that they react. They may fall apart, and they may never come back. They may, through PTSD and other impacts, they may come back and have depression and anxiety, and then after a few months, come back to sort of where they were before they left. And then there's a third, which is what we've heard called post-traumatic growth, where individuals take the adversity and take what has happened to them and find ways to grow from that. And that is part and parcel of folks who are demonstrating resilience. And so if we look at resilience, what does it look like? It looks like people who are coping well with high levels of disruptive change, whether they're intermittent or ongoing. Folks sustain good health and energy when under constant pressure. Some of this research is not rocket science, and yet it gives us even more data and information about how we really need to take care of ourselves. We bounce back easily from setbacks, overcome adversities. Basically, you can see that change to a new way of working and living when the old way is no longer possible. Again, if we're living in a complex world and applying complicated approaches, it's going to be a real challenge for us. There's some research out there in a number of different areas. These are just a couple of quotes. Angela Duckworth has done a lot of work on grit. You may have seen her work out there. And then, of course, Michael Jordan, sort of the classic. You can hear that from any number of whether it's inventors, innovators, sports folks. It's the failure, the over and over, that we end up bouncing back from to get our positive. The research that's out there right now comes from a number of different areas, and you can see whether it's emotional intelligence has the big umbrella over a lot of this, whether it's grit or studying happiness, optimism coming from the world of positive psychology. What you'll find is there's a common piece in the middle of all of this, which is the resilience and mindset piece, which helps us as individuals be able to be productive and respond in the situations that come at us in what we call this new VUCA environment, this new normal. So let's review a couple of the avenues or pathways to creating resilience that are out there based on the research. So 30 years of research by Martin Seligman, sorry. He's done a lot of work with the U.S. Army and is doing more right now. They're using 1.2 million folks from the Army in their research. And what they have done is found that they need to create both physiological as well as psychological fitness for the soldiers as they go into theater. And what they have found is remarkable and powerful results. So, for example, folks who have gone through 6 weeks of mindfulness training, many of which right here just west of Boston, actually, in the Worcester area, when they find themselves in theater or in situations that have a heightened level of stress, that they are much less quick to react. They act with more intention, and sort of that whole set point for them of stress is much lower, so that they can act in a way that that is much more intentional. And that's huge research that's being done by the Army, which we can all apply in our lives, which may not be life and death, but certainly can be extremely stressful. So based on Seligman's research, what he has done is identify these building blocks for creating and sustaining resilience. So you can see none of them are really rocket science. They're the kinds of things that I think most of us would say, yes, I want to have positive emotion in my life. I want to have relationships, and I want to have purpose and meaning and create accomplishments. And what he has found also is that optimism is a key to resilience. And we'll find a little bit more of that as well with another researcher in a moment. But the optimism, the definition of that is basically having a habit of interpreting setbacks as both temporary and changeable. And what they found is that we can learn to think with more optimism. And it is possible for us to develop that in our own selves, which is, I think, very exciting, and that's possible for all of us to increase that. Al Siebert, who has written The Resiliency Advantage, this is another great resource, has identified building blocks. Now, you'll notice there are some commonalities there around sort of what they're looking at. And Seligman had talked about both the physiological and psychological fitness, and you'll see some of that here with Al Siebert's work as well. And what he says is that resilient people are those who consciously decide somehow that they're going to do their very best to survive, cope, and make things turn out well. And he talks about that the knowledge and tools that can be put out there for us around resiliency are only as good as our actually adopting a mindset or a perspective around being self-motivated and managing ourselves to use them. And of course, like any tool, left on its own, it won't change our experience or change us. We have control over that. So let's boil this down a little bit. We've got resiliency is both what we've learned is a state of being, the physical, emotional, and mental fitness piece that we talked about. It also can be a set of skills and strategies for action. And if we use just for fun for a moment this ball of elastic bands or rubber bands, if you can imagine one rubber band around a baseball or around a ball of wadded up paper, it's not going to bounce very far. But if you put a lot of them around, you're building that ability to bounce. And so in a weird kind of metaphor, we do the same thing by building physical fitness, emotional fitness, that social connection, the positivity, the engagement, the sense of purpose, all those pieces that we put into our own lives. We can build our capacity, our reservoir, if you will, of resilience. I worked with a key executive in a manufacturing company who was incredibly hypervigilant and really in a new role and paying attention to a lot of things. Learning curve was very, very steep. And one of the things that he started to do was wear the nightshades, the mask across his eyes at night to block out all of the light that might be coming from the clock radio or through the shades from the ambient light outside. And he has found by just doing that one simple thing for his physical fitness, he has increased his quality of sleep and therefore increased focus and energy. And sometimes it can be something just as simple as taking care of something within our body that can help with our ability to do what we need to do as leaders. And so within resilience, some simple and immediate things that we can all do for ourselves. Something as simple as wearing, coverings on our eyes when we go to sleep. The social and emotional piece, is there support for you? Are you working on your emotional intelligence? The mental fitness and the mental toughness, which is, as we know, can be very important. And then what I'll share with you over the next time that we have together is a few strategies for you to use to help you. Again, you can start playing with them this afternoon. There does not take a lot of training in order to do any of that. And as a leader, when you're thinking, so let's pause for a moment and think about, as a leader, if I'm going to hire someone, do I want to hire someone who's had a string of successes, or do I want to look at someone who might have had some failure or some opportunity for challenge? And what we know is that NASA, when they're hiring for astronauts, they reject those folks who only have a history of successes. They select folks who have had some failure, because what we know is that for folks who are successful that have had some failure, there is some resiliency lessons built in. And if you're an astronaut, let's face it, there are all kinds of things that can be thrown at you, and that ability to overcome failure or overcome challenges is really important. And Jack Welch, again, he chose executives based more on their capacity for growth than on their past accomplishments, which both of these kind of run counter, I think, sometimes to how folks hire people based on my experience with dealing with folks. And yet it makes a lot of sense if we're looking at that from a resilience perspective and what we want in our folks. So if you think about, if we're describing resiliency and we're looking at the people who demonstrate high resiliency, we've got folks who are flexible, that are durable, that have that attitude of optimism. And then we look at the group B, we've got people who are lacking resiliency. We've got a list of things there that I don't need to read for you because they're pretty self-explanatory. So I'd like you to do a quick check-in for yourself, just sort of rhetorical, where do you see yourself? Is there a combination of A and B in your world? And then I do want to get a sense of how many of you know folks who do have, who demonstrate this lack of resiliency, just to get a sense of, how many of us are seeing folks that are lacking resiliency. So Jeff, we do have a poll for this. If you could bring that up for question 2, thank you so much. So folks, if you could we'll just take 20 seconds or so and see if we could get a sense of how many folks out there are seeing folks with a sense of that lack of resiliency. And as the numbers come in, we've got a pretty high number. We've got 50% of you are saying 6 to 10, 37.5, 10 plus. So yeah, so obviously there's a fair amount of people lacking resiliency out there, and that is not a surprise because boy, are we just inundated with information and the pace of life that's going so fast that it's very, very easy to skip that taking care of ourselves. It just, I think we hear so often that we need to eat, get enough sleep and eat right and do your exercise and all of that, and sort of becomes wallpaper after a while. And yet what we know based on all this research is that is so important in addition to the skills and strategies for how we can develop and maintain resilience. So let's take a look at a couple of tools. Some of you may be aware of Viktor Frankl, who was just recently passed away, actually, and he was he was interned in Auschwitz and Turkheim, and he made this statement: between stimulus and response, there's space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth for our freedom. And his choice when he was interned in Auschwitz was to not let the people who had taken his freedom of food, of clothing, of family, of action, of anything. What he chose to keep was his choice of his mind and his perspective. And that helped create some resilience for him inside of himself. And so that there's a reframing that he did that helped create that resilience for him. The reframing of the experience that he was involved in. And there's some research that's been done at Columbia University's Teachers College, and what they've found is that events are not traumatic until we experience them as traumatic. And any one of us who have had toddlers or been around toddlers, you'll see if they slip and fall, sometimes our actions of overreacting to how that must be a horrible thing may in fact influence their experience of that falling might be a bad thing. And so looking at it from our own perspective, how we frame that is really important. And the research really does give us a lot of fodder for that. The neuroscience teaching people to think of stimuli in different ways and to reframe it when the initial reaction might be negative. Even if we have that initial negative reaction, when we shift it and we reframe it, we can decrease the emotion and we can better regulate our own response. We can make ourselves more or less vulnerable basically by how we think about that, which to me is just fascinating. And so it's this reframing thing where we do have choice. If we frame adversity as a challenge, we can become more flexible, and we can work with that and grow from that. If we focus on it, frame it as a threat, we can create this traumatic event, which could create this paralyzing negative impact on us, so that we have no opportunity to move forward. Robert Fulghum, in his 1986 bestseller, wrote a short comical piece about dandelions, and he talked about his neighbor wanting to get rid of all those pesky weeds, and yet what he was talking about was how dandelions can be such a rich source of ingredients for salad, for wine, for creating the wreath around your hair when you're a young girl, or the magic of blowing all those little pieces away when it turns that way. The reframing for us in our business world in post 2001, I ended up being laid off due to the financial situation of the organization I was with. And so for me, taking that as an opportunity to start my own consulting business and take my lessons learned internally and take them out to organizations across both for-profit and not-for-profit was really a wonderful reframe for me, whereas I could have ended up spending a lot of time, you know, suffering. It was really an opportunity for me to redirect and reframe my energies. And again, I'm sure you have examples that you can see in your world around that. And so that's the reframing piece. Now, mindset is another piece that I talked about a few minutes ago. Mindset is a fascinating area of research. And again, I think for some of us, we're aware of this and have lived this in our lives. But Carol Dweck has done a lot of research around mindset. And if you're looking for a resource that gives you a lot of examples, this book does that. She covers workplace, sports examples, school, family, and she finds that the beliefs that we have about ourselves can limit our potential or enable our success. And it can often mark the difference between excellence and mediocrity, just our mindset alone. Forget all the rest of the skills and tools we have in our tool belt. Christopher Reeves is a great example. Paralyzed from the neck down, told by the doctors you'll never move, your body again, and he refused to just sit and accept that. And through rigorous physical therapy and electrical stimulation, was able to, before he passed away, gain back muscle, motor movement in a number of parts of his body. And that was a mindset of that he was going to grow and develop, as opposed to be a victim of his circumstances. So this is one approach to the mindset, which is smart people succeed, and if you succeed, you are a smart person. Well, actually, the research shows that that's not necessarily the case, and that's actually a limiting belief for us, because if I believe that I'm smart and then I get a C or a D on a test, then it's going to impact my ability to put my efforts back towards that necessarily, if I believe that there's a fixed mindset that I must succeed if I'm smart. And they did some research and showed that with 4-year-olds, when they were offered a choice, they could redo an easy jigsaw puzzle that they'd just done, or they could try a harder one. And even at 4 years old, there were children who had a fixed mindset, and they believed that kids who are born smart don't make mistakes. And the growth-oriented kids really welcomed the harder puzzle and found the safer puzzle to be boring. And so there's really this opportunity for us to look at what is the mindset that we as leaders have about ourselves, and what is it that we have about the people who work for us. Another piece of research that you'll find in her book is that child prodigies often advance to a certain point and then don't advance beyond that, because there's a fixed mindset. They've been told they're smart. They've been told they have this immense skill, but the need to develop beyond that, where if they fail, can be catastrophic because of this fixed mindset. So the fixed mindset comes from the belief that who we are is fixed, whether we're looking at any aspect of sort of intelligence, personality, etc. And the growth mindset comes from the belief that the basic qualities are that you can cultivate those with effort, that we can grow, and that we can move beyond sort of where we're at. And so here's some language around skills and comfort zones and mindset. So if you look at these, you can see that the fixed mindset, some people are born to be singers. I'm not one of them. Therefore, I might never try to sing. the growth mindset, I didn't start with much singing talent. I have a lot to learn. Now, I might never get to the level of a professional singer, but that doesn't mean I can't advance and change that. Again, same you can see with math. You can see the language shift there. And again, many of us, I think, have played with this. It's just interesting to look at the amount of research that's been done on the power that this has on our ability to overcome challenges and adversity. And Jeff, I think we have a question, a poll, just to sort of see how folks are interpreting this and what you're thinking about this. So which of the comments below would you consider to be under that growth mindset piece? So if we could have folks just for the next 20 seconds or so identify which of those you think would be considered growth. Great, yeah, thanks. So you can see that a lot of folks have chosen that last one. I'm not sure I can do it now, but I think I can with time and effort versus maybe you don't have the talent. So there is a real different shift there in that. And so for us as leaders to know our language really matters because it tells our brain certain things, and then how we choose to respond and how we act sort of comes from that. So that mindset can be really important to be aware of, as well as for how we develop and lead our folks. So one of the tools that we've used for many years with clients is this stop, challenge, and choose. And so it requires, first of all, a level of awareness, catching yourself in the moment, being aware of the mindset you're using, and then challenging yourself and saying, is this the mindset that's going to help me become the leader I want to be, help me continue to develop resilience and work in a way that's going to help me do my best work for myself and my organization. And then remember, you have a choice to shift your mindset or reframe the situation from one to the other. And sometimes it's much easier said than done. It's much simpler to say that. And oftentimes, I think that there's the value of having someone objective to talk to about a situation that can help us reframe that situation. But it's one that can be, it's simple, you can use it, you can sort of practice it and just set times to check in with yourself, even if there's nothing big going on. Sometimes when it's not a big stressful situation is the best time to practice a new tool such as this, and just kind of stop and say, all right, is this the mindset that is growth that's going to lend me to where I want to be going? Warren Bennis, who works with a lot of leaders, interviewed a number of effective, successful, great leaders. And this was a statement which I think, again, as leaders is really important for us to know about ourselves and to know about the people that we're leading, the leaders that we're bringing up within the organization. They all agreed that leaders are made and not born, and made more by themselves than by external means. Everyone's capable of self-transformation. And I would say that some of the research indicates that made more by themselves than by external means, oftentimes the external means provide a crucible of sorts for us so that we have the opportunity to practice some of those skills and strategies around creating that resilience. So I think that's there's an opportunity there. All right, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my advance button. So mindfulness. Now we're going to shift to mindfulness and presence. William James said, "My experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind." So again, that comes back to that internal control that we have about what we pay attention to and what helps develop us to be who we are. And Yvonne Lendl, for those of you who may be tennis buffs, there's an example of focused mindfulness and self-regulation during the 1984 French Open. He won his first major victory over the current leading player at the time, who was actually John McEnroe. And he was down 2-0. And when he was asked about it afterwards, he said he wasn't thinking about the score, he wasn't thinking about the match, and he wasn't thinking about this being a major championship. His complete focus was on each shot before him, one stroke, 1 point at a time. And he said that's when the momentum shifted. He just kept his focus on each stroke and let the rest take care of it. And that's that bringing that mindfulness piece to what is it in the moment right now that I can do my best work with. And it's that bringing that growth mindset to who I am right now and what it is that I am doing, and not getting caught up in all of the external noise and the whirlwind that's going on. Because you go back to Stephen Covey's work from 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, focusing on what we can control ends up influencing that which we can't control. But if we start focusing that which we can't control, the circle of what we can actually control becomes smaller. And so we really want to focus on, this fabulous instrument of this human body that we have to do this leadership that we have. So mindfulness and presence, they provide an opportunity for practicing a solid internal state, a foundation, if you will, for you to sort of have some calm waters in turbulent times. Practicing mindfulness has a positive impact on several levels. It can provide immediate attention to bringing some centering and grounding in the moment, and some meditative states that impact both here and now, as well as creating a higher set point of that centeredness piece. And I will share an example from my work. I lead a part of a leadership conference every August for a large group of young, talented leaders in a large organization. And it happens every year, and it's an incredibly stressful situation. There's a lot of VUCA aspects involved in it. And several years ago, I started practicing a centering that takes about 10 to 30 seconds a day at a time, and I was doing it about 10 times a day. And it's just a quick centering piece. And when I went to do this leadership conference a few years ago, I had unsolicited several people come up to me and ask me or tell me that they saw that I was much calmer, and they were curious what I had done to be much calmer, what I was doing in the moment. And I will tell you, in the moment, I wasn't doing anything different. It was a cumulative impact of having spent some time just centering myself and sort of raising that set point of calm to the point where the resilience it was just already in me, sort of ready to do that. So let's see, where are we? 12:46. So I'm going to do a little experiment, and I know that some of you may not be, you may be checking email or doing something else, which is fine. Again, it's all of our choices to do anything. But I am going to lead you in a quick, just 30-second centering, and it's the one that, similar to what I just shared with you that I did that had that powerful impact for me, and it's had for, by the way, for many of my clients that have practiced it. And so I'm going to ask you to just, wherever you are, just sit in your chair, or if you're standing, that's fine. And just take a moment and focus your eyes on something neutral that doesn't have a whole lot going on. And you don't have to close your eyes. You can if you'd like. And I'm just going to lead you through, just as I said, 30 seconds. So I'd like you to take a deep breath all the way in, and then let it out. And then as you take the next breath in, I want you to try and feel the soles of your feet and feel the ground, the floor supporting your feet. And then on the next breath in, I'd like you to notice your legs, relax them. Notice if there's any tension and let it go. And then on your next breath, I'd like you to sit straight as if there was a string pulling at the top of your head, straight up and lengthening your spine. And let the chair do all of the support, and the structure of your spine and your skeleton support your body. And on your next breath, I'd like you to relax your arms. Notice your fingers. If there's any tension in your back or your shoulders, let it go. And then on the next breath, let all the facial muscles in your face just totally relax and go. One more breath. Imagine you're being connected with all of the people in your community, from your shoulders out. And one more breath. Imagine that all of your experience and all of everything you have learned and experienced over the course of your life is exactly what you need to face whatever it is you're facing right now. And that's all behind you in like this huge, you could imagine like a huge dragon tail or something, that it's just all with you at any point you need it. Take one more deep breath in and out. Notice any more tension in your body, let it go. And then bring yourself back. And Jeff, I think we have a open-ended poll for this. I just like to know if what did you notice? Do you notice anything different right now than before? And again, this centering exercise can be helpful in the moment, and it also can be helpful cumulatively throughout. So more calm, brain relaxed. That felt good. You felt like going to sleep. Yeah, well, don't do that. Don't do this if you're driving, then. More relaxed, have a small smile. Yeah, a sense of peace. Yeah, so imagine if you did that, even 5 times a day. And then over the course of 5-7 days a week, you've done that multiple times. There can be more focused. Yeah, there can be really huge benefits to just these really small things that we can do in our world. So thanks, Jeff. We can get rid of that poll. I do want to get through the rest of this so that we have some time for at least a couple questions. So lessons from the sports world on resilience and self-regulation. I have always been fascinated with biathletes. I think it is remarkable what they do. They ski, the women 22 kilometers an hour, the men 26 kilometers an hour. They go all out, and they're not just skiing, they're skating, they're going fast. And then they have to stop and immediately shoot accurately 160 feet out a target that's anywhere between 2 and 4 inches wide. So imagine the ability to regulate their emotions and their body in order to do that. And the research that has been done, or the work that they do with biathletes is, as you can imagine, they pay attention to negative self-talk. They replace it with positive self-talk. Even if they're doing laundry or whatever, they practice it on a daily basis. And they might practice it out loud when they're doing some boring tasks at home. They also use relaxation techniques, similar to somewhat to what we just did. And then they use visualization and practicing sort of at every aspect of what's going to happen at every minute of that race, and when they're stopping and they have to control themselves. And we know visualization from the sports world, from a number of places, has been shown to be very powerful. Sharpening the saw, again, going back to Stephen Covey, means preserving and enhancing the greatest asset you have, which is you. And as a leader, man, oh man, it is the greatest asset you've got. And how we as leaders lead certainly can help impact how the experience our folks have, and obviously our success of our organization. So we've got a number 5 poll, just get a quick sense of what folks see as their greatest challenge. Can we pull that up real quick? So we'll take 20 seconds to do this. So if you folks would fill this out, which of those is your greatest challenge? Okay, so we're kind of spread all over the place. Great. Well, hopefully this information has been helpful for you, and we'll move to the next slide then, which is just a quick recap of what we've talked about. There are many avenues to creating and maintaining resilience, and optimism is key. Creating that reservoir for resilience, that state of fitness that we have, this fabulous instrument. How are we taking care of it so that we've got something to draw upon? We don't get triggered in the moment. And what are a few skills that we just covered? Reframing, mindset, having that growth mindset, knowing that we can stop, challenge, and choose, and do some centering for ourselves. Some resources related to this webinar. This slide deck will be up within a week, and in the meantime, Jeff is going to post this list of resources on a LinkedIn discussion post after this webinar is over. So if you have questions that we don't have time to get to today, you can certainly follow up and we can answer them there, but you'll also have access to all of this. And then I'm going to shift to questions. I know we don't have much time, and I think Risha has been curating the questions that have been coming in. So thank you all very much. I know it was fast and we covered a lot, but Risha, do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Melisa. This was such great information. We have a question from Larissa, and she's curious to know about the pairing of inhaling and exhaling with the relaxation exercise. What's the purpose of that?
Of the pairing of it?
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I mean, why would we do the breathing along with the relaxing? I think that's.
Okay. Yep, I got it. Thanks. Because it's fascinating. If you think about all the different activities that are associated with relaxation, whether it's or introspection, whether it's yoga or prayer or all kinds of things. The common piece to all of that is breath, and breathing has such a huge impact on our bodies, physiologically, biologically, what it does for us. We can speed up our heart rate, we can slow down our heart rate, and it helps us. Actually, when you're doing meditative work, if you just focus on the breath as it comes in and out of your lungs, it helps draw your attention to something in a very meditative state. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thanks, Melissa. Another question is related to the topic of resilience. You mentioned several times that optimism is the key. Do you have any tips for how to cultivate, an optimistic attitude? What would be the first three things that someone could do?
Oh, that's a great question too. So for optimism, I would say one of the first things is to look at the growth mindset work that Carol Dweck has done, because um, if you approach things with a growth mindset, you by default start to have an optimistic approach to things. If I believe that whatever comes my way, I'll find a way to handle it. If I believe that whatever is presented to me, I may not get to the place that I want to, but I'll find a way to get some forward progress. I'll find a way to grow and learn from that. And I think that's sometimes the trap that folks can fall into, is that they sort of think, well, if I'm just positive, it'll all work out. Well, it might not work out. I think the point of the growth mindset is you might not get what you want. Kind of going back to the Rolling Stones, you can't always get what you want. Um, but what is it that we've learned this time around that we can then apply to the next time, which is really at the core of resiliency, is how do I continue to grow beyond that? So I would say really one key is getting really clear around how do you have a growth mindset. Second is that reframing. I was laid off, and what did I do with that? I could have, so taking an opportunity to step back, objectively look at something and say, okay, what is it that I have control over? What is it that I'm choosing to do with this?
Great, thanks. We have another question from Lisa. She says that she sees management continue to expect higher and higher productivity for staff that are burdened with Group B mentalities, and who are dealing with increasing levels of the VUCA environment. Is there a reality shift due at management level, and how does that
Yes.
change competitive?
I would say emphatically yes, and I think the leaders who recognize that we're now asking, we've sort of taken technology and said, well, that's the panacea that can answer all our problems. People can be 7 times more effective. Well, sometimes technology adds more to our plates, and so I think there is a reset of expectations needed at the higher levels of leadership and management around what are we asking people to do and what is the stress level. And I think I think the companies that have really strong wellness programs are seeing the productivity. I worked with an organization who found, after a very aggressive, strong wellness program was put in after 3 years of an aging workforce, they actually were able to level off their very rapidly rising healthcare costs. And so it can be done, but you need wisdom at the top.
Great. Melissa, thanks so much for your presentation today. I think we're out of time for questions. I really think that you had a fascinating topic to share with us. So on behalf of the BU Alumni Association, thank you so much. My thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today, and I specifically want to thank those of you who have donated to BU in the past. We couldn't put on programs like this without your support. I've got an incredible lineup of webinars coming up in the next year, and our next session will be interesting for all BU alums who find out about the variety of resources BU offers that will assist you in preparing for a job search, building a powerful BU network, or facilitating a career change. On January 18th, 2017, Questrom alumni and Alumni Relations Associate Director Jeff Murphy will present 8 ways Boston University can jumpstart your career. You can view the schedule of upcoming webinars and register for them now on our website at www.bu.edu/alumni. As always, if you or any BU alumni you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar or have a topic you'd like to showcase for the VU Alumni Association, feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office, or by email you can contact Jeff at jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thanks everyone for your time. Have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be.
Thanks, Risha. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Same to you.